It's a special honor and pleasure to introduce Professor Jens Reich here this evening because of his long association with the college. Obviously, he gave the inaugural lecture at the Summer University here in 2000, and I can say for all of us who come here to teach, it's been a source of a kind of awe to be associated with someone who, even for those of us who grew up outside Germany, is kind of legendary figure, mainly because of his association with the movement for democratic reform in East Germany, with the new forum and its role in the last months of the GDR regime, and also the influence it had later on the debates following or leading up to unification and afterwards. I was just reading again today some of the founding documents of the movement, and they're extremely powerful and relevant in many respects for society today. I mean, of course, they're relevant to different degrees around the world now, but they're addressing the questions they address about the disconnect that can occur between government and society, and the necessity for bringing private concern into public debate. We're trying to get people's preoccupations voiced and to try and encourage those preoccupations to cohere into a political program that's obviously still very relevant for all of us. I also remember distinctly as a faculty member first coming here, reading in one of the Berlin newspapers an article featuring a picture of Jens Reich and talking about the events of 1989, and a quotation from him about, not about 1989, but about the spirit of 1848, about the idea of the democratic will of peoples and communities expressing itself, and the importance of holding on to that in European traditions. And I think that we can now say, with all the work that he's done, and his whole, in the light of his whole career and his commitment to those ideals, that it's the spirit of Jens Reich that is also there whenever this kind of force is operative, or a collectivity tries to articulate itself and organize itself in this way. So it's been a huge privilege for us to be linked with him and have him linked with the college. He was, of course, already by the time of his participation in this movement, a very renowned scientist. He was a research leader in the project in genetic research at the Max Delbruck Institute in Berlin-Buch. He was already a professor of bioinformatics at Humboldt University. He's received, I have them all listed here, but I won't go through the many prizes he's received, both for his political and scientific work. He's received basically the highest honors that this country has to offer in the realm of civic engagement and scholarly activity. I think one theme that emerges in in the giving of these awards and what people have said about his work, besides of course the immense courage and integrity he's always shown, is his commitment to clearly communicating the results of scientific research and the implications of it, his commitment to scientific education, which is obviously crucially important in the themes that are going to be discussed this evening. I don't know if some of you saw the debate that broke out recently over the remarks of a well-known German novelist about these sorts of innovations and what kind of devastating consequences they would have for our society. But I mean, something like that really shows you how important it is for us to be well informed about these issues, even if we're not experts or researchers in these fields. Another clearly evident theme in tonight's talk and in Jens Reich's work and career is this connection between scientific knowledge, scholarly knowledge, and ethical and political questions. The imperative of keeping those close together and not losing sight of the ethical dimension to any sort of scientific development. And that's one reason why, with his permission, we have decided to introduce a scholarship at Bard College Berlin from next year's incoming class onwards. And I've just given him the shortlisted candidates, which he can hopefully mull over a glass of wine after he's finished his lecture, and tell us what he thinks of the profile of our selected students for this honor. But before he does that, I want to invite him to deliver his lecture this evening, and ask you to join me in thanking him once again.
Thank you, Catherine. Well, as we just heard that there was some problem with the human self-perception, I think I should make a comment about this. We discussed it when thinking about how the headline of the talk should be. When we have here in Germany in the Ethics Council, for instance, the National Ethics Council, it's a discussion about the things I'm going in a way to run through today. Usually, in particular, people who feel, well, who are not at ease with what is going on in biotechnology and modern molecular genetics and medicine connected to it, then they usually say that what will become of our Menschenbild, the image that we have of ourselves, the self-perception. That is the reason that this strange self-perception went into the headline. Perception is something, as you all know, that comes from outside and is a superficial thing, is a phenomenological thing, and I don't think that the self-perception is the main aspect of what about humanness is changing and is perhaps in danger, but it is, as one discussion that we had on a conference of the German Ethics Council a few years ago, when there was also a conservative lady who spoke all the time about the changing Selbstbild. A distinguished professor made the interjection, nicht Selbstbild, sondern der Begriff des Menschen, der Inbegriff, how to put it, the embodiment, the quintessence, the notion of humanity is changing, not as much or not as importantly the image that we have of ourselves. So I was playing together with Eva about these things, and it came then to this headline with these things in the background. I have when my life has been with biology and medicine, and I have what many philosophers has no idea to look at the world from a sort from a given transcendental ego who must be there in order to take a connection, to come into connection with the world in any way. Something that in Kant's writings is present, and he doesn't say much about what this given thing is about, and I think for me, with my profession, it is what I think about humankind is done is connected with the question: where do we humans come from, and where are we to go? On which way are we now? And this is quite clear for a biologist that before understanding or coming to terms or even discussing the question that the headline has put, is to look back at the momentum that we bring with us. Where do we come from? This is false already. It's the icon that always is being shown to school children and to others. The icon that already haunted Darwin and Huxley in his clash with Bishop Wilberforce. The idea that there is a lineage, a linear ancestorship from ape to man. You remember Wilberforce's ironic question whether Darwin or was it Huxley claimed that the grandfather or the grandmother line was those who brought the apes into him. This is the misunderstanding. The better thing is if you have not a ladder but a branched bush, where all the relatives that we have when looking at ourselves as Homo sapiens, and together with a time scale about which Darwin at the time could not think, because simply the remnants, the sources were not at hand. Only Neanderthal, one bone was at hand at the time, but now we know much better and have this branched tree here where our relatives, not our ancestors, are from the ancestors in such a branch. You don't see much. It's the famous missing links that you never see, but where you can derive that they must have existed if you have a reasonable branch explaining why chimps, for instance, are still with us, and although we have common ancestors. This is Pierolapithecus, found in Catalan, who is perhaps the oldest common ancestor, 40 million years before. Of course, such picture is a drawing from an artist, derived from the bones, skulls, and so on, what is at hand. But we know now that with computer software, if you have a skull at every detail, it's quite reliable to reconstruct the face. And it must have been more or less this guy here, which is, together with the chimps, our oldest forefather. Here it's 6 million years later. The Sahelanthropus chadensis in Chad found looks a bit closer to us, although still we would not accept him as human and would not expect much many human traits in it, but it is closer. Here is then Australopithecus afarensis, 3 million years, the famous Lucy bone and footsteps showing the upright gait in the chalk, in the petrified chalk soil there, and already closer to human, for external appearance. The snout or the mouth is flatter, but still surprising here is not the brain. It's still very small volume of the brain, which was surprising when it was established as the oldest, because people thought that human traits would come first. That the first event to humanity would be the explosion of the brain volume, and then everything else came. Obviously, it's not the case here with this guy. Here is Homo already. This is clearly, if you would shave him and give him decent clothing, I think he could pass as somebody around us without much, astonishment. Remember perhaps the novel by Wilhelm Hauff, the junge Engländer, the young Englishman who came into a satire about a petty bourgeois small town in southern Germany, and how these people in that well-clad, well-developed small town, how they came to terms, how they accepted a real ape, which was in a green suit, and a lot of interesting, funny things happened. Such a guy would perhaps also pass there as a young Englishman if being introduced. Here's a collection of the physical features that make us sure when we find something, when the paleontologist, not me, find something in the earth of Africa, Asia, Europe, or America. The upright posture and walking, the corresponding legs, the nakedness, skull and brain volume I spoke already about, the oval jaw, not this way but this way, no canines out of the mouth for chewing hard plants. And then things that we can only infer, which are human already, a very long childhood, longer than any other primate, with a baby, with a sort of fetus being born prematurely, with life after reproduction that is quite unique in the mammalian kingdom. Usually after reproduction, animals die sooner or later. And then keeping fire. This is really momentous. A momentous step towards humanness. You have the fire as protector against the wild animals around, and you can cook material, make it digestible and chewable to an extent that no ape in the jungle can digest. One of the biggest advantages for us as non-animals is this. And then clothing, of course, taking the fur of other animals instead of the lost one that we display. What makes me believe now that human beings, some of them shown, there's a lot of others in the internet, when you click image and human evolution, there's a whole gallery of imaginations of people from the findings that have been buried out. When and how? What is human? When does something confront us with the sudden realization that is human. When did this occur and how? How do we recognize humanhood in the emphatic sense? And then my tentative answer to this, which convinces me at least, is take tools. But tools are also taken by apes, even by ravens and crows. So tools are not exclusive, they are not unique. Look into the faces. The face, after all, is, as Edouard Levinas has shown, is something that is really the meeting between ego and you. He has a high esteem of the face as one of the main characteristics, but we have the face only by imagination. They are imaginary. We have only the skulls. And artwork. And artwork is simply what is the real surprise then. Here, 40,000 years old, a Venus or a woman, en face and en profile, carved out of ivory, and in a way that you immediately recognize it is a woman of the time. And this, of course, makes you startling. This is human, no animal can achieve this, making a picture of its neighbor. A picture in quite different material, carving out very carefully. Here are people, men at work. Still more here, the Venus of Galtenberg. Still more human here. The way, the mastership with the human statue and its attitude, its pose is being kept. I have an amusing picture here from Czechoslovakia, where a model has posed to make how to put it in, to propose a hypothesis what the statuette, it's the same, basically could have. It's not complete, and therefore we have to guess a little. What would have been the situation by which the statuette had been made. And convincing now, of course, that this, what has been made here from stone, from chalk, is really human in the emphatic sense. And then here East Spain, this exquisite shadow grass, two-dimensional, abstract studies of quite different types of motion of living entities, creatures, people, dogs, and then these deer. And the situation dramatic, even more dramatic as a study of motion here, also 15,000 years ago in France. This was a famous cave, pictures on the wall of cave, drawn with chalk and charcoal and what they have at hand, ochre. Here, a colored animal. Picasso, the admirer of this. All afterwards is decadence. He had claimed, well, here Guanacos in Argentina. And suddenly a hand, a human hand, ghostly. Here in the same Cueva de las Manos in Argentina, 10,000 years old. What is, what is the message from all these hands? It's in negative. They must somehow have imitated this modern spray, color spray, in order to make all these different hands. Here's another, in another lighting. What does this bottle post from distant past tell us? What is their concept of manhood, our topic today? What was the enigma of ensoulment that must have taken place somewhere deep into past, where we don't have any other ideas how life would have been then? Must have occurred. Are these pictures practical, or are they to enchant the gods, or superstition, or is it fun, simply? Did they have a language? I'm convinced, I'm sure they had a language. People who can make abstract pictures by reducing three-dimensional to the two-dimensional in a way that keeps the three-dimensional form of motion, must have had a language, maybe a very developed one. After all, the modern languages became easier and easier and simpler, as we know from the old sources we have from India and from old Europe. How did they look like? How would they behave when appearing out of the shadow when they came here? I'm convinced they are like us. So that we have a prehistory of about 50,000 or 30,000 or how many thousand years, where people have been in the darkness of the past among us and were the same as we are. This is where we come from. 50,000 years, we remained the same, essentially. By the way, also genetically, because the genetic drift that takes place in animal societies with such a big number of specimens takes also in the range of 1,000, 10,000 years. So they were genetically also quite close. There's in Leipzig an institute, Max-Planck Institute of Anthropology, molecular anthropology, where they succeeded to extract from one of those bones DNA, not fully rotten, and could do the sequencing of the DNA of the Neanderthal Homo, and you have read it in the newspaper those days perhaps. We have still a lot of genes in common with the Neanderthal. There must have happened something interesting. It's about 5 to 10% of our gene variants which are already in these old Neanderthals. Here is the idea of how the Oring Nation could have looked like. I'm not very convinced that this is real. Here, even less. Cro-Magnon. Cro-Magnon is the guy with these caves in Ardèche and Lascaux in France. They are called Cro-Magnon, and I think we would accept them as ours, as being ours. Questions remain. Is the evolution, the natural evolution, to come to an end? Has it come to an end? We have small indicators that there is still something changing among us. The lactose tolerance, the milk sugar tolerance, for instance, that has, because of its advantage for rearing children, has has accepted a mutation that makes it possible to digest milk in countries where cattle can live, in the northern and the southern, close to the poles, for climatic reasons. While in the middle, lactose intolerance is quite widespread. They don't like and don't drink milk. No cow is there around, at least not in the time when this genetics has been fixed. And then everybody knows about melanin, the conditional expression of melanin, with the white people mostly here sitting on sunbath, but if not because of the problem with the scurvy, vitamin D and so on, while happy people at the equator can have a dark skin all through their life without induction. About HIV resistance, there's discussion going on. There are people who have a certain variant of this gene, CCR5, which is the entrance controller, the Türsteher of at the receptors of immunocells, through which the HIV virus snaps in. But if you are happy to have this variant, then you are immune to HIV. I don't know whether this gene will spread over the population, because HIV is something concentrated in certain subpopulations. Is it possible, these are all adaptive, small, one gene adaptations, is it possible that we get a mutation to produce superhuman, a monster mutation one day? I deem it possible. If I look at the stories that go with some autist children and people who distance themselves from autism, from the rest of the society, but suddenly have, and it's even being suspected that there are gene mutations responsible, suddenly have surprising gifts. All those people who can draw the logarithm of a 20-digit long number within a second or so, can calculate the square root of, again, such a number, or have unprecedented talent in musical hearing. Those people make me believe that it could become possible that we have mutations that separate themselves from the rest, reproduce themselves, and then we can go into different directions, Homo sapiens and somebody else. It takes hundreds of generations to spread this over the population, even if it's very advantageous. Well, so looking back, what has happened essentially since those 10,000s of years? Man has achieved becoming independent of nature, creating an artificial secondary nature. Look around here, what is in this room here, untouched nature. Not even a mosquito flying around, and if so, you would kill it at once. Everything it's a world totally artificial, and when outside you have something that reminds you of nature, it's never untouched, it's kept, it's combed, it's in any way selected. So what we have taken some of the living nature with us on contract, chicken, pigs and dogs and horses, a contract we give you a comfortable life, the youth and adulthood, but the contract is that we take it away whenever we deem it expedient. What we have not achieved, in spite of that surprising degree of subjugation of nature, is dominance over our own nature. Very modest success here to improve or to change our own nature. I've always liked to bring the example of Emperor Nero sitting in the Colosseum and looking at the gladiatorial game, and because he was obviously very short-sighted, he looked always through a polished, rimmed emerald at the killing that went on down in the stadium. So this is something. I have also my emerald here. 2/3, as is being said, at least from the Japanese population, is short-sighted, a genetic defect that makes me asking whether we, all the 2/3 among us, statistically spoken, whether we would have been, the males here, the man here, whether we would have been very successful in propagating our genes at the time when hunting in the savannah was the main task of manhood. And if you don't see it at a distance of more than 10 meters, I don't know whether you will be able to hunt down a lion or some other beast. Glasses, hearing aids, heart pacemakers. 40 years ago, the first time that surprised me that now technology, electronics, goes under the skin. And there are people, very famous people, who still live, although they were doomed to dying already at the time, like Hans-Dietrich Genscher and Helmut Schmidt and others who are still with us, only because of this machinery here, which does not do much and is sitting very superficially. It gives the beat for the heart, which otherwise would go astray in chaotic movement, a very widespread trait. So here begins something of improving our own constitution, but still not the essence, the innermost of it. Still unfulfilled are eternal dreams of man. I am convinced that they were already the dreams of the day when Cro-Magnon lived on this earth, or Neanderthal. The dream of immortality. Lucas Cranach, an old man, when he painted this picture in his late 70s, the fountain of youth. You can look at it in a better reproduction is lousy. You can look at it in the National Gallery downtown. Yeah, the eternal dream of rejuvenation. People entering from the left side on all sorts of carriages, old people, wizened people, ill people, being carried by others, entering here, entering the bath, coming out rejuvenated, ready for entertainment and obviously love. At once, unfulfilled a dream so far, an old dream I've deemed. And the other eternal dream is creation, reconstructing not just a crutch crutch or glasses, but reconstructed the very constitution of your body or of the bodies of your offspring. Eugenics failed. Negative selection cannot succeed soon. Positive creation of a new man. Let's look. Johann Wolfgang Goethe dreamt about it. As he heard, as an old man, also 80 years old already, he heard a rumor about that in Berlin. A chemist, Friedrich Wöhler, had succeeded in doing something that was, through all the ages of alchemy and earlier, impossible, to synthesize a organic compound, urea, from inorganic sources, without vis vitalis, without élan vital, as it were. Goethe was fascinated, ordered all sorts of letters from his pal in Berlin, Zelter, and learned about this, and it inspired him to write down the laboratory scene of the second part of Faust. I cannot restrict, you have here the text, I cannot restrain myself of reading you the German text. Wagner also am Herde, Mephisto, willkommen, es ist gut gemeint. Wagner, willkommen zu dem Stern der Stunde, doch haltet Wort und Atem fest im Munde, ein herrlich Werk ist gleich zustand gebracht. Was gibt es denn? Es wird ein Mensch gemacht. Ein Mensch? Und welch verliebtes Paar habt ihr ins Rauchloch eingeschlossen? Behüte Gott, wie sonst das Zeugenmode war, erklären wir für eitel Possen. Was man an der Natur Geheimnisvolles pries, das wagen wir verständig zu probieren, und was sie sonst organisieren ließ, das lassen wir kristallisieren. Crystallize is no longer the technology of the day, but we are very close to fulfilling what did not succeed here with Homunculus, who later on suffered a very early death when accompanying Faust and the Mephisto into ancient Greece. Here is something where it comes into play, not crystallizing, but working with the earliest thing that a mouse can be, a blastocyst, aged 3.5 days. Human, I could have sold this as a human blastocyst because they are so similar at that stage. The inner cell mass, this green half moon, contains the embryonic stem cells, and the outer circle is a trophoectoderm from which the placenta for feeding, for fixing at the uterus and feeding them with blood is being made, but the mouse or the human being is made from these embryonic stem cells. They have the potential to form whatever you order from the human body, if it's a human blastocyst, of course. It is here's a scheme of it, and they are the craftsmen of the body. They make the body out of nothing, out of what is surrounding it. They know how to do it. We humans are tinkering a bit, but are not able to do it so far. They are the master. They can either go in or be brought into the lab, into the petri dish, and then differentiate in all sorts of cells and tissues. Everything has been tested if it is possible. You need certain hormonal and regulatory signals, and then they do it whatever you wish. heart cells beating in the petri dish, or other cells, nerve cells, forming their ends, trying to get into contact, and so on and so forth. The other way around is, of course, to develop themselves on their own program, on their own ideas, and forming a fetus, and from the fetus then giving birth, in this case, to a mouse here, but could also be a human being. Here is now the next step towards laboratory scene of Goethe, an adult cell of mine, maybe from the skin, or the hair, or saliva, or blood, is being reprogrammed by factors, by hormonal factors that Dr. Yamanaka in Japan has 7 years ago mixed together. It's reprogramming to IPS, to pluripotent stem cells, those embryonic stem cells which can make everything, and here you have a gallery where you can order in principle all sorts of regenerating cells. It's still a problem to get them to work in the body and so on and so forth. I'm on the fantasy trip now. I think we can put together the human body. The stem cells will help us to do it. It's a realistic vision by now. Here, application already, somewhat different case. This little boy had lymphatic leukemia. And I remember when I was a student, I had a heart inflammation and lay in the bed at Charité, and there were 4 guys, all of them young guys, all of them except of me died soon after, and one had also the leukemia. The leukemia was absolutely fatal at the time. Now you can kill this cancerous bone marrow tissue by chemotherapy, for instance. Therefore, the boy is bald, he loses hairs, and so on and so forth. And a graft given from a suitable donor of a small dose of bone marrow can settle into his now empty bone marrow system, and can settle there, and the child can be healed. So this is stem cells from bone marrow, not embryonic, but adult stem cells that have already, in some cases, a very successful function already. Another thing is that these pluripotent stem cells, but I will not go into the detail here. Let me say simply a word. With this IPS technology, it is possible to clone mice. One needs something technical, tetraploidal recompensation or complementation. And it is possible to get from the cell here, from this body cell of that mouse, after a process of surrogate mothers and so on and so forth, you get the iPS cell mouse, which has the same genome as the iPS cell has. So you can tinker and work and do everything with the iPS cells, and then make not just humans for the moment, but make mice with programmed genetic properties to be studied, how this can be treated, and so on and so forth. But also man, reproductive cloning. Here, picture from the Dolly protocol, as it's called. But I said you that already with the Japanese things. It's also possible. The donor person gives here its genome in the form of the cell nucleus. into the egg that another donor of egg cells has provided, and it is being injected into this empty cell. It has to be enucleated, the egg. The diploid cell is being added, and then it develops, and into a foster mother it matures, and then a clone child with the same, a twin, an identical twin of this one, can in theory be produced. It's no principle, as a proof of principle is being done on sheep and on dogs and on other animals. So it is well possible that in 2098, the old Europeans of Donald Rumsfeld's saying will sit there exhibited, and the new people, clones, smart types, look with interest on, not on me, but on several people sitting here, and have not been cloned or otherwise artificially produced. What I'm saying is, of course, it's still struck with hundreds of difficulties. It's still a pure fantasy, what I'm explaining, but I think I have given enough detail and examples that it is not a wild fantasy, a wild utopia. These things will improve, and looking at what happened during the last 30 years, I am sure that stem cells will do very interesting work in regeneration and perhaps even in recreation. Now the cell nucleus, containing the information, bioinformation, which goes from one generation to the next. This is here a copy when I was student here in Berlin at Humboldt, long ago, 55 years, 58 years ago. We had an old, wizened professor, well beyond his retirement age, who held a very interesting lecture about things like evolution and what already at the time an ecologist, what man does damage to the nature wherever in the world, raising away the jungle and doing all sorts of dams instead of the ecosystem which was prevailing, and so on and so forth. And one day we were also it was no obligatory lecture. There was about 5 or 6 people here who were interested. One day he came in and said, "It is stupendous. You read this paper." He had a copy of one page, and you see it's the authors of this short notice are Jim Watson and Francis Crick. And here is the icon of biotechnology of today. First time, the birth of this double helix. And here is a very interesting paragraph here. It has not escaped our notice that the specific pairing we have postulated immediately suggests a possible pairing mechanism for the genetic material. And this was stupendous. If you understand if you read and know a bit about the structure of nucleic acids at the time, this is later all the Callot models, you see that if these bases here are arranged with their counterparts, their complements always, and you go up this ladder, it is a text that you can write down from it, provided you can analyze the things. But it is a chemically coded text. Nucleotides are the letters. We have 4 of them, the 4 alphabet text that become immediately clear. And what did not escape their attention is that you can take both ribbons, fold them apart, and then you have the half letters, where each letter is a complement to another one. If I know these, then I can predict these exactly, because this is the structure. You have a text that can then be by a synthetic enzyme be copied, or it can, if you have a piece of it and another piece which is the complement, they will stick under all conditions, suitably chosen of course, they will stick specifically. They find their partner who is complementary, identical, with absolute certainty. So this hybridization property is so strong that you can do all sorts of analysis with it. And well, what is the third thing? Copying. I think it is sufficient to produce the whole technology that we have now. Hybridization and template-driven synthesis. But at the time, it was a regulative idea, as Kant would have said. It was just an idea. Yeah, it looks nice here, all these things, but we have no chance of ever seeing any detail here. That this is a code, and the code is being translated into messenger and then into protein. All these things came soon out, and we were happy to see, and the real progress set in only 20, 30 years later, when it succeeded to snatch away the secret of biotechnology from microorganisms. Everything which is possible now in the analysis of genes, of DNA, RNA, proteins, everything, wherever you look, there's always thick apparatuses, electronics, computers all the time, but the principle of analysis of life has been provided by microorganisms. The PCR reaction, for instance, cannot work without an enzyme that has been extracted from a bacterium that is sitting in the hottest of the geysers in Iceland. And this is a special form that makes it possible, I don't go into the details, to analyze these things. The invention of the PCR reaction is polymer chain reaction, is for which Kay Mullins has the Nobel Prize won, should have been assigned to the bacterium sitting there truly in the geyser of Iceland. We have taken from nature everything, and nature obeys to an extent which is mind-boggling. Simply, the analyses that are going, that billions of letters of DNA and RNA are analyzed in gigantic parallel assemblies, and everything can be controlled to a way that it is correct, everything correct, no error. It's mind-boggling. I wouldn't have dreamt of it 50 years ago. It's the same, by the way, with computers. As I was young, I would never have, with these old things that were available at the time, these machines, that this would be the industry that we have now. Computers, and then, of course, also electronic apparatus is this wave of electromagnetic thunderstorm that is everywhere in the world now. Strange thing we are living in. So let me come to an end some way. Artificial genetics, I think I have made it clear that that humankind is going into this molecular recognition, molecular synthesis, and recombination between different DNAs makes it possible to decipher, interpret, diagnose, synthesize DNA sequence, RNA sequence at will, at design. Here is a list of things that are possible now for Dr. Wagner in Faust's laboratory, decoding the individual genome for $1,000 is behind the door of everybody, not just of the human as such, but of everybody among us. We will have in 10 years our genome decultured. Prediction of the properties that follow from our genome. Correction of defects will be possible, as being done already in certain diseases. Eugenics becomes possible in a broad sense, planning life genetically, screening life, newborns for instance, selecting life in pre-implantation diagnosis of the blastocysts sitting when artificial insemination is being done, sitting in the petri dish, ending life, abortion, regenerating, forming spare organs, designing and reconstructing the constitution at will, as far as it functions, forming chimera, cloning life. Chimera, I have a few final pictures. I'm asking myself, when all this is possible, where is the fantasy of humans to look into the future, not just in terms of DNA knitting and so on, but how can future people look like? When we look back, we have the same phenomenon. They are similar to us, but we see there are differences. How in 100 years? And the principal question is, shall we keep humankind as it is, another 50,000 years, or go we forward to new humans by steered evolution? Here are proposals that I found in the internet. Everybody among the guys has a certain recommendation with him. They are all men, of course. Cyborg, Astron, Newman. Newman is such an mathematics genie. Then you have Uni-Human, wonderful skin color, and this one here is absolutely for Chernobyl suitable. He is absolutely such a thick skin that he will not, that X-ray will not go through, and neutrons and so on. Here is chimera, trans-specific chimera, the Lycian monster of Greek mythology. A third a lion, a third a goat, and a third a serpent, a dragon. No longer fantasy, is a beast, an animal, a poor guy. It's poor geep, it is called, already being formed in the 19th in Britain. Not a goat, not a sheep, and rather poor. Neither a sheep, neither a goat. Here are constructions by the Polish artist Igor Morski. Mixtures between human and reptile, for instance. Interesting, isn't it? Here, poor. Pas de chien, même tenu en laisse, even if on leash, cannot enter the park, sitting here, sad. And this is a sympathetic guy here, dogman. Well, are we entitled to go into all these directions? Shall we lose our self-perception and the self-conception as humans? What is the essence that we have to fear to lose and should not? These are the questions at the end. Or shall we better stay with natural procreation and evolution? Berlin Bach professor with wife making a walk, meeting his secretary in Pankows Schlosspark.